Welcome to Barbecue Channel. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We truly appreciate every single one of you. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, we'd love to hear from you. Let's dive in. Don't bother coming to this one, Liz said, her smile faltering slightly, like a lie hesitating to fully form. Her words lingered in the air, casual yet deliberate, testing the tension of the space between us. It was 3 days before the company party, a day that would mark the first crack in what I believed was my perfectly framed world. My name is Albert Brown, a 46-year-old seasoned account manager working for a thriving manufacturing firm. To anyone who asked, my life seemed ideal: 25 years of marriage to my high school sweetheart, Elizabeth, though everyone called her Liz, a sprawling lakefront home near Arlington, and a daughter, Maria, whose ambition was so boundless she was already engaged to William, a young man from a family far wealthier than ours. But the thing about a seemingly flawless life is that its fractures often go unnoticed, until they don't. That evening, Liz dismissed my attendance at the party with a polished smile that felt off, lacking warmth or sincerity. It wasn't an invitation but rather a gentle nudge to stay out of her world. For 25 years, Liz had been my partner, my confidant, the woman who once laughed over ramen noodles in a dingy college apartment, calling it a feast. Still, something sharp and unsettling pierced through me, a flicker of doubt that sparked unease. Yet, I chose to ignore it. Liz was my Liz, unchanging and steadfast, or so I believed. Then came the company party, the night where the threads began to unravel. Liz had always been strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair resisting any hints of gray and her piercing blue eyes lighting up any room she entered. But that night, wearing a sleek black dress that accentuated every curve, she wasn't just stunning, she was putting on a show. As we stepped into the glittering banquet hall alive with energy, I noticed how eyes lingered on her. People weren't merely admiring her, their attention carried an air of complicity. And then I saw him. He was in his early 50s, his gray hair slicked back with an arrogance that matched his sharp suit. He exuded a confidence that was overbearing, as if rules bent to accommodate him. His smirk sent a chill through me as he cut through the crowd, heading straight for Liz with predator-like precision. Before I could fully register the moment, Liz turned toward him with a smile that didn't belong to me. It was warm, intimate, and sharp as a blade slicing through my chest. "Albert," she said lightly, almost dismissively, "this is Chad Smith, one of my sales reps." Chad extended his hand with practiced ease, and out of politeness, I shook it. His grip was firm, his smile overly familiar. "I've heard so much about you," he said, though his gaze barely met mine, remaining fixed on Liz as if I were nothing more than an inconvenient shadow. "Likewise," I lied. The next hour passed in slow motion. I couldn't help but watch as Liz charmed the room, her natural charisma captivating everyone. But her focus kept drifting to Chad, every glance, every shared laugh between them stinging like a fresh wound. I tried to rationalize it, dismissing my paranoia as overthinking. But then came the dance floor. Liz loved dancing. We'd always been in sync, moving as a perfect pair. But that night, her movements felt distant and distracted. Her eyes weren't on me, they were scanning the room. And when I spun her in a slow turn, I saw where her gaze landed, on Chad, standing at the edge of the dance floor with his arms crossed and that infuriating smirk. He wasn't just watching. He was waiting. Back at our table, I tried to shake off the unease. Liz excused herself for a drink, her sleek black dress catching the light as she moved through the crowd. And Chad followed. They met at the bar, their conversation hushed, meant only for each other. Liz leaned closer, her lips forming words I couldn't hear but didn't need to. Her body language, the tilt of her head, the gentle brush of her hand on his arm, spoke volumes. Then I heard it, one word that struck like a gunshot. "Darling," she said softly, her tone tender. My heart thundered. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Every fiber of my being screamed to confront them, to demand answers, but I sat frozen. This wasn't paranoia. It was betrayal. "Albert, I can explain," she started, her voice trembling. "Explain what?" I replied, my tone calm and steady, but every word carried the weight of my fury. "That you've been sneaking around behind my back. That you've been lying to me for over a year." "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, her hands shaking as she reached for the photo. "I don't love him, it's just physical. It doesn't mean anything." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "It doesn't mean anything? You destroyed 25 years of marriage for something that doesn't mean anything?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but for the first time, I didn't care. Her pain didn't matter. The woman standing before me wasn't my Liz. She was a stranger, a liar. She launched into a desperate flurry of excuses, her voice shaky. She talked about loneliness, about feeling neglected, about how she thought I wouldn't notice. Each word felt like another knife twisting in my gut. "Stop," I said, my voice cold and firm. "I've heard enough." Liz looked at me, her tears falling freely. "Albert, I made a mistake. Please. We can fix this. I still love you." But love didn't mean the same thing anymore, not after what she'd done. "You want to fix this?" I leaned in, my eyes locking onto hers. "Then start by packing your things. You're leaving." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at me as though I'd struck her. But I didn't flinch. For 25 years, I had given her everything, my trust, my loyalty, my love. Now, I was taking it back. If confronting Liz had been painful, what came next was worse. The next day, my daughter, Maria, my pride and joy, called me. Her voice was filled with concern, but not for me. "Dad," she began cautiously, "Mom told me you two had a fight. What's going on?" I hesitated for a moment before telling her everything, Liz's affair, Chad, the evidence. I didn't hold back. Maria listened in silence, and for a brief moment, I thought she might understand. But her response shattered me. "Dad, it's not that big of a deal," she said, her tone dismissive. "People have affairs all the time. It's not the end of the world." "Not a big deal?" I repeated, incredulous. "Your mother betrayed me. She lied to me for over a year." Maria sighed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Look, I'm not saying it's okay, but maybe you're overreacting. Mom loves you. She just made a mistake." "A mistake?" My voice rose, anger bubbling to the surface. "She destroyed our family, Maria. How is that just a mistake?" And then she said the words that would haunt me, "Maybe you should just let it go, Dad. It's not like you've been perfect either." I was speechless. My own daughter, the person I had sacrificed so much for, was defending Liz. The final blow came when Maria casually added, "Oh, by the way, Mom and I were talking, and we think Chad should come to the wedding. He's important to her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "If Chad is at your wedding," I said, my voice icy, "then I won't be." "Dad, don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious, Maria. If he's there, I'm not." And with that, I hung up. Liz's betrayal was one thing. Maria's was another. Together, they lit a fire in me that refused to die. They thought I would sit back and let them humiliate me, that I'd play the fool. They were wrong. I started planning in secret, every step methodical and deliberate. Liz had no idea how much control I had over our finances. While she played house with Chad, I moved everything I could, our savings, our investments, into accounts she couldn't trace. I refinanced the house, took out loans, and left the debts in her name. The BMW she loved so much. I borrowed against it, leaving her to deal with the fallout. But that was just the beginning. Liz and Maria wanted to rebuild their lives without me. Fine. I'd make sure they started from scratch. Every night, I sat across from Liz at the dinner table, playing the part of a husband willing to move forward. She smiled, made small talk, and acted as if she'd won, as if my confrontation had been the climax, the storm that passed. Little did she know, I was the eye of the hurricane. Over the next few weeks, I executed my plan with precision. I withdrew funds from our shared accounts, transferring them to offshore accounts under untraceable names. Liz wasn't financially savvy, she'd left all the planning to me. That ignorance was now her downfall. Meanwhile, I handled the house. 15 years ago, we had purchased it outright, a fact Liz loved to brag about. What she didn't know was that I'd refinanced it multiple times for investments she never asked about. I secured a new loan for $2 million, tying it solely to her name. Her beloved BMW. I took out a $40,000 loan against it and funneled the money into my private account. By the time I was done, every major asset we owned was either mortgaged or tied to debt. Liz didn't notice a thing, too caught up in her fantasy with Chad to see the storm brewing. Maria's wedding was supposed to be her dream day, a grand affair with no expense spared. Initially, I'd agreed to fund it. But her defense of Chad had soured everything. One morning, I called the wedding planner. "This is Albert Brown," I said. "I won't be funding the wedding anymore. You'll need to discuss payment with Maria or her mother." There was a long pause. "Mr. Brown, the deposits. Keep them," I cut her off. "Consider it compensation for your trouble. If Maria wanted Chad at her wedding, she could let him foot the bill." I wasn't done. Maria's fiancé, William, was a decent young man from a respectable family. He deserved to know the truth. I met him for coffee and laid everything out, the affair, Maria's dismissal of it, her insistence on having Chad at the wedding. I even played audio of Maria saying, "It's not a big deal. Men cheat all the time." William's face darkened with every word. "Thank you for telling me," he said, his voice steady but pained. 2 days later, Maria called me in tears. "William called off the wedding," she sobbed. "Why would you do this to me, Dad?" "You did this to yourself, Maria," I said coldly. "You chose to side with your mother. Now live with the consequences." The first cracks in Liz's world appeared a week after I walked out. The loan against the house went through, and the bank wasted no time contacting her. Liz called me in a panic, but I didn't answer. Her second call came after the BMW payments started piling up. Then came the credit card bills, now maxed out from the wedding deposits and her lavish spending. Chad wasn't much help. His wife, armed with the evidence I'd anonymously sent her, filed for divorce. She was a major shareholder in the advertising agency where Chad worked and used her influence to have him fired. Overnight, he went from a hotshot sales rep to a middle-aged man driving for a rideshare company. Liz's reputation crumbled. I forwarded evidence of her affair to her boss, along with transcripts of her mocking office policies and deadlines. The agency couldn't afford the scandal and let her go. Within 2 months, Liz and Maria were living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a rough part of town. From what I heard, Liz had taken a job as a waitress at a roadside diner. Her once perfect nails were chipped, and her blonde hair had lost its shine. Maria, having lost her wealthy fiancé and her dream wedding, was working part-time at a coffee shop, her college tuition now her responsibility. As for me, I settled in Florida, far away from the wreckage I left behind. The sun was warm, the beaches endless, and the people didn't know me or my past. My finances were secure, tucked safely in offshore accounts. I lived simply but comfortably, driving a truck and living in a travel trailer, both bought with cash and registered under my cousin's name. Every so often, whispers of Liz and Maria's struggles would reach me. They were barely scraping by, and Chad had vanished into obscurity, his life just as miserable as theirs. But I didn't feel pity. For 25 years, I had been the rock, the provider, the one who kept everything together. When they chose to betray me, they underestimated what I was capable of. Now, as I sat on a beach watching the waves crash against the shore, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.